Hey, everybody. All right. Happy Friday. You are live on Shally's Alley. It is the end of June. For some people, the beginning of the summer. For me, it's literally the middle of the summer and it is hot out there, but definitely the last Friday of the month. Next week is the 4th of July. So for a lot of us, it's going to be a short week. For some of us, it might be a really long week, long days anyway. So in advance of the celebration, happy 4th of July to all my listeners in the United States. We will have that on Thursday, and then Friday, it's kind of commonplace for people to take the day off. So we are not going to have a live Shally's Alley. We're going to be rebroadcasting one of my favorite episodes, which really means I'm just going to pick one at random because I can't play favorites. They're all good. So you know how that goes. But what are we talking about today? Well, so today I am super excited to have been able to land a whale of a guest. This one's been one I've been trying to reel in for quite some time now. We've been friends for years. I've known William in the space. I knew him before we actually worked together, but we in fact worked together when he was at TiVo. And I got to tell you, William is probably the most pragmatic, strategic mind that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. As a consultant early on, I learned a lot from his approach to pragmatic decision making, like kind of cutting to, get rid of the fluff, cut to what's really what the real impact is going to be. I talk a lot about talk to the outcomes, not talk to the steps, but I in part I learned that from William and his analytical sense, and he's just been someone that I've always looked up to for a strategic mind. Currently, he is working with a company you might recognize called Spokeo. William, can you tell us a little bit about Spokeo for those of you who don't know what it is?
Sure. Happy Friday to you, Shally, and your audience. In advance, happy holidays also for those
Thank
who are
you.
going to enjoy the 4th of July. And yes, we go back a few years, a few hair follicles for me,
Yep.
folks. And Spokeo is simply a company that specializes in digital identity search. So whatever people have as far as a digital presence, Spokeo makes that searchable. It does it on the consumer front from its website, and now also offers enterprise solutions for law enforcement, credit and collections. We'll be getting into real estate and e-commerce down the road. So a lot of what we call web application building, a lot of security, because we deal with very, very large amounts of data sets, about easily 2 or 3 petabytes worth.
Wow.
Everything's offered on a subscription basis, or for the enterprise standpoint, seat licensing. And it's a great company of it's about 17 years old, privately held, founder led, and about 200 people in staff.
Yeah. So, and it's a tool actually I use. I train recruiters on. It was a tool I've been using for sourcing for a while. But can you explain to me why? How is it that you always end up finding work at companies that I am a customer of? I mean, going back to like TiVo, I was a big TiVo user back in the day, and you were there for a long time. Then Groupon, I was a big user of Groupon, GoDaddy, and Spokeo. Like you just go into all these companies that I like to, I like to actually use as a customer. How do you do that? Are you just following me around or what?
I guess maybe there's something I know about you that I haven't admitted to. No, there's a lot of different elements, I suppose, in our lives that you kind of look, and there's serendipitous effects. For me, I was adopted and raised in Fremont, and pretty much in the Silicon San Francisco Bay Area. So you get exposed to those companies, and I was blessed to be able to have some of those good those opportunities and cut my teeth as both an individual contributing recruiter and then also in leadership roles, and got to work with some great minds, very interesting times. And I've always been interested in technology, maybe a frustrated product manager or wannabe engineer. So the neat thing, as you know, in being recruiting and sourcing is you get to hunt for those people. You get to engage
Right.
with people. You get to find out what makes them tick, and the opportunity to put some of these people into some really interesting combinations of teams and departments and new functions and initiatives just has all kinds of great stories that you get to talk about, shop about. Some more challenges and problems that we've had to, you and I certainly brainstorm. But I guess part of it has always been starting small, and as a result of that,
These are high growth companies.
the asking of
Yeah.
the so what about, so what does this mean, how do we get this done, and how do we scale it, has been kind of part of my vocab since we met. In fact, I'll go back a little bit of history. I think you and I met right about the point where I was doing retained search in the Bay Area, and it was an invite over LinkedIn. I thought initially, I this is the funny part, I thought LinkedIn was one of those cults initially. I thought, okay, this is another pyramid scheme. I'm going to get snickered.
Right, right, right,
It
right, right.
wasn't that at all, obviously, but
Yeah. Well,
that's
it was
what it
early
was at
on. It
the time.
was, yeah.
And after, as a result, that kind of just started to have the curiosity mindset that you had, and say, well, I wonder how this works. How does this apply? And that has just also really served me well. Your curiosity, you kind of make very infectious to people that
What
want
if
to
you
learn
push
and
this
keep on
button?
learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But you have just done really well with high growth, bringing companies up from being, smaller to like just going through a either a big shift or a big change or a big growth spurt and everything. So talking about um, something that is really second nature to you, which is scalability. You've always been really good at figuring out what's going to scale ahead of others, like before others have figured out how to scale. You're like at the forefront of getting into things that are going to scale well. What's your secret for that? Or is there, how do you know what's going to scale, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I guess I've heard it say for some of those popular military leaders, I tend to have more metal in the back than on the front.
Hmm.
And so, and I don't mean necessarily that people shot me or launched stuff at me, but some of it's just, some lessons that got really, really drilled into me, at various different points in my, career path. One of it was, get really, really clear on what needs to be delivered, and also understand the why. And it isn't that the why itself doesn't make a difference in how you get it done, but it does add
Okay.
to the burn, the drive, the relentless or continuous improvement mindset that I didn't initially understand, but quickly adopted because I got to work for people that were just relentless on saying, I need more, I need better.
But what is it that you really want? That's
What
how
do you
you
really,
like.
really
What do
want?
you really
and
want?
and
Okay.
and, and not being satisfied with however good you have it, knowing that, I mean, that's, we're only good at it as our last hire or our last quarter, and just realizing that that's part of the nature of business, particularly here, in the West. And so from that standpoint, that's one thing. And then the second thing was the relentless pursuit of, I won't say perfection, but improvement. Also taught me that in order to get things done, it was really hard. I found when you had other people that had other agendas. Sometimes it was budget concerns. Sometimes it was other alliances. So the one thing I adopted in that continuous mindset was, well, let's run tests. Let's do an experiment was the key word. And particularly with the people that were naysayers about things, I said, you may be right.
Oh,
So let's do this
okay.
little micro
Okay.
test. And if it fails, at least we learned something from it. And it could have been why I was
Instead of
wrong.
fighting the naysayers, you actually went to them and said, all right, why is this going to fail?
Yeah,
Let's
particularly
figure
if
it
I
out.
didn't have somebody to show as a shining example of what it could be, the
Oh,
positive.
gotcha.
I'd love to have that, but sometimes you didn't have that. So I started with, let's just do an experiment. And if I'm wrong, then well, at least we didn't, sell the house. But if I'm right or if you're right, then let's double down on that and let's push it. And that grew more support, more partnerships, and more wins as a result of that. And then we've done it also being also ruthless in right sizing things. Taking away stuff from your team members because they're your teammates because they're not using it or haven't used
Oh,
stuff.
man, that's a
There's no
huge
sense in
one.
putting good money just for people to feel
Yeah,
good
you know
because they
how
have
many
LinkedIn seat.
organizations do that. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not just LinkedIn. I mean, everybody likes to poo-poo on LinkedIn when, you've got 10 recruiters and only one uses it. It's kind of an easy target. But the same thing applies to many other technologies. I mean, if you went through all the effort to bring on board a CRM and nobody's really using it, maybe you just don't really need a CRM. You thought you did, but you don't. Why isn't anybody using it? Is it leading to that outcome that you
right.
want? Yeah,
Well, and
that's
so
that's
that brings
good.
up another point related to what you just said there, Shally. Getting to understand why people are not using or using something or supporting something becomes really, really helpful. And it could be your own staff person, it could be a team that you're trying to partner with on some hiring assignment. To understand why people didn't do something or don't support something because becomes pretty important. It could be that they didn't understand what the steps were, or it could be that they don't understand the motivation or the purpose behind that, and how you then choose to engage them. Becomes very, very important. If you don't understand that, you could misprescribe a solution or come in at the wrong way, and unnecessarily make it adversarial or something worse. In that sense, so that's something else I've learned is to ask those questions about why is it you don't see it my way, or why don't you agree, or why are you not turning in your feedback? And when you engage with that sort of honest curiosity, I think it tends to disarm a lot of the perceived power struggles, or value struggles that usually aren't there. Usually, people are aligned with wanting good outcomes, particularly as it relates to their team, their initiative, their year. And if you position yourself to be supporting them as opposed to being the powers that be, it goes a lot farther and a lot better.
That's really insightful. Yeah, I'm glad I asked about that. So there's also as you get ahead of the curve and get into not being reactive, right? So
Mhm.
there's this reactionary seat that recruiters tend to fall into or get pushed into, if whatever. Not trying to assign any kind of blame here, but for whatever reason, getting into a very transactional, uh, a deli wheel kind of situation where you're just grinding and grinding and grinding. It's really difficult to get out of that. But one of the things that you need to do to get out of it and have that help your success is pipelining. And so that's something that you've always brought into your teams is smart pipelining.
Yep.
And I think you have a way of explaining what the pipeline for, because it could be overwhelming if you haven't started this. Like, where do I start? What do we pipeline for? You can make the mistake of pipelining for the most urgent recs, which may actually not be the best way to pipeline. And we've talked about this before, where you want a pipeline for not the freaky one-off recs where you're never going to be able to recycle those candidates. You want a pipeline for the bread and butter, I think is what you call it, right?
Yeah,
So tell me
that's a
about.
great way of putting it. Aligning with the business. That most businesses look at, smartly, kind of the 80-20 rule. What can I do 20% that will get me 80% of the way there? And focus on the major stuff. And because if you're not aligned with the business, I don't know who's underwriting your budget, but that gravy train just won't last long. And so to be attuned to that, to make sure you're sized correctly, that you're using the right tools, once you have that and understand what you need to really deliver on, then you have the choice to help define what your scope of what you're going to actually deliver. Well, with this resources, these tools, this budget, and this sort of time period, I can deliver X, Y, and Z. If you want A, B, and C, that's a relevant discussion, but that's separate. And then you certainly also need to do the same thing within your team to say, okay, we have this this exercise that we need to go through and recommit to what we're going to do. And for us, here at Spokeo, we realized that it was just not fun posting and praying and grinding out just in time sourcing. There's a time and place to do that, maybe initially, but there's no virtue in doing that day in and day out. And I found most of the recruiters and people I get to work with don't find that life-giving. They don't find it exciting or challenging. And so to keep that, the positive elements of that, prioritize and say, well, what are the key things we just rather not be, doing? Some of it's administration, some of it's this grinding stuff. And this is where we came up with pipelining on it. And, one example we have that we use a lot is we tend to hire full stack developers. They're versatile. We need different levels as far as experience and capabilities. And we could post and get a whole bunch of them, but it seemed to then just kind of kick us back in the teeth in a bad way when we had all these thousands of people that had applied to other roles that we were doing nothing with. I mean, what's the point of having a reservoir of static resumes if you don't go back and revisit them? Because, as you know, people change, people grow, people take on different capabilities and roles. It could then become viable candidates in the future if only we checked. So that's where we started doing the pipelining, not the role by role or profile by profile of each candidate or applicant, but we started to do keywords, degrees, and other things that were salient to certain positions, such as the web app. And we had, I don't know, about 4,500, I think was last count, for the web app positions that were now ready to, with a push of a button, to be able to start communication. Hey, you had applied here at Spokeo at one time. We even engaged in the conversation. We have some more positions open for you. We'd love to talk with you about them. Is now a good time, or are you interested in that? And then being prepared, because not everybody's going to stay in the same place. Some may want to, I want to do more back end, or I'm now a product manager. Good. Allow for those sort of responses to come in so that you're getting your pipeline smarter and smarter as time goes on, rather than just hoping and paying unnecessarily agency fees or other just-in-time solutions that will always cost you more than if you just spent the time knowing what your company needs you to deliver on time and time again, and getting really, really good at that, such as with the pipeline.
So getting really good at that one pipeline that is meat and potato, bread and butter, meat and potatoes. Sorry,
right.
He lost my analogies there. But then here's the trick, right? So when you have, forget about where to put it. People always struggle with: do we need a CRM? Do we not? I don't want to get tied into a tool. You could have a pipeline in a CRM. You could have a pipeline in a spreadsheet. I mean, I've put together spreadsheets in Excel that can be used as pipelines. However, the one thing that you do need to do, no matter what, even if you use crayons and a notepad, is you've got to figure out who these people are in a way. And so, what are your recommendations for how to tag candidates? And what I'm asking for really is like the structure from a higher plane of thinking. What is the composition or the elements of tagging that make it useful? Because I ask because you can very easily go in the direction of way too many tags, and then you have this tag cloud of 20,000 tags, some of which may be redundant or repetitive or unnecessary, and tagging becomes useless. But you can also have tags that are so simple or so encompassing that they're also useless, because engineering, for example, could be, right? So what's your philosophy on how to structure tagging to organize these?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you can get to the point where you're slicing water.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And then that's where you meet yourself saying, what am I doing with my life? 1 a.m. in the morning. So we have before we started that particular pipeline project with the web app, we started to say, well, what are the things that we need to have as minimums to consider a person? So out of the, we looked at everybody that had applied to these roles, and some had no business applying. You wondered what job they even read. And then there were some that were closer. So we looked to put in the ones that would get us closest to what the hiring managers had typically looked for in a profile. So for our particular example, I'm not saying this is prescriptive. It's going to vary from anybody's company or organizational situation, but in our particular environment, they needed to have a computer software, computer science related degree.
Okay.
If not, so that
Degree.
meant information systems wasn't good enough, William, I was told, okay, by the hiring manager.
Okay.
Or data analytics wasn't good enough, but computer engineering, computer applications. So we got that down. So that was one thing we said, okay, we'll put that in there, and we figured out a Boolean search for that. And people say, hey, you guys still use Boolean? I said, I don't want a tool if I can't control my search terms, I have a trust issue,
right? Because you don't
with
know what
that algorithm.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll get over it still as I get older, but I still like being able to do that. So we developed that, and then once we found the right set, we created a tag for that, a short, simple one. I think it was 2 or 3 letters or a word. And okay, we got that one taken care of. And then what was the next one for us? And for that was it gets a little bit harder because ours is high availability and large web applications. So we have to think of, well, what would that be? So we started to think of the amount of data that would be used or accessed to this. And for us, I mentioned 2 or 3 petabytes. So we set a minimum, since we were going to be built pipelining, of 5 terabytes or more. And that kind of really starts to shrink that down. And then after that, we were looking for, I'm trying to remember what the other tag was.
So I'm hearing a pattern here of, sorry, I'll let you continue, but I'm hearing a pattern here of using tags that are, once again, really related to your outcomes. So you could tag a bunch of other things, but those tags don't mean anything about what you're looking for. So really focus only on the tags that lead to the outcomes that you want. If everyone has to have this particular degree, then that becomes a tag. The names of 20 other unrelated degrees are not necessary to tag, right?
That is correct. Of course, and there's some that overlap. There's some that are good for a couple positions, and you allow for that. But the moment you realize that there's a better tag that gets you what you're really after, then you go with that one. You always go with the greatest number for that, because you always do refining later on. The only other thing that I think, besides qualifying meeting a hiring bar, is the nature in which either they applied, so source related, or in which they left your vetting or consideration workflow. So did they withdraw, or did they miss not getting a high enough score in the hacker rank, which would be true in our situation. You want to message those people differently. And if you don't have it tagged, it's really hard to be able to message that uniquely.
Because of that slice of,
right, we're so sorry that you didn't quite make the cut for the hack rank, but if you're up for trying it again, we've got another exercise, and we have an opportunity for you to be considered. Because just because you failed once doesn't mean you're always going to be a failure in our book. Because if that's the case, then you just might as well stick with posting and praying, right? You just see who applies and deal with that. This is kind of almost very trying to do positive reinforcement that just because we said no is more of a no, not now for this role. So the fact that we invite them back to be considered again, if it's good timing for them and of interest, if they haven't switched their career trajectory, then great. They should be messaged differently. I think that's sort of, somebody gets me, or somebody understands and appreciates where I was and when I tried. Goes a lot farther than just saying, hey, you want a job?
Ready to get back to work?
Yeah, ready to get back to work.
Apply here?
Right.
Apply now? Okay. All right. So once you get past the pipelining and tagging. Now you have useful lists, however whether they're crayons or spreadsheets or
Right.
advanced CRMs. Now, what's the next evolution? Do you move into predictive information? Is that competitive intelligence? What's the next step? What's the next evolution in that?
Well, I think that can go in a couple ways. I mean, one, you need to think about your selection cycle that you do put people through. It should look a little bit different for people returning or being recontacted than for first
Yep.
time
Right.
folks.
Right.
I'll submit. But then I think there's also good intel that can come in from competitors. Now, the example I gave you from web app, I mean, we think we compete with everybody for full stack developers, for large scale websites. So that doesn't have a true evil empire like I'm trying to go beat up Oracle or some other company. If I could just hire them from Oracle, I win. In my goals, it's much broader than that. So I don't have a list of companies to go steal from or beat up. I mean, I know who tends to hire full stack people.
Right. Yeah, but in other words, if they do petabytes,
I'm interested.
They're
Yeah.
right, and that could be healthcare, biology, scientific research,
Yeah.
something we don't even know about yet. AI,
Right.
whatever. Yeah, so it
Which
doesn't
makes it
matter.
really fun. I mean, I remember, we were. I might have shared this story with you back then, but at TiVo, we were looking for, of all things, IP attorneys, and we just
Oh, yeah, I remember
we
that.
couldn't find the right people. And what hit it for us was there was one person we said that was a great interview. We looked at the profile. The person had actually been a software engineer one too many years in undergrad, stopped and switched and got their law license. So we ended up looking for somebody that had a JD, but that had been working for or gotten even their computer science undergrad degree. They were the most creative, looking for opportunities versus boogeyman behind every clause type of thing. And that's what we were looking for. We were looking for somebody that could see opportunities and craft agreements that would license our technology in a fair bilateral way between companies, and that was great. Then after that, it was like taking candy from a kid. It was so easy to find that. That made all the searching, all the tagging, a breeze after that. So it's amazing when you're very clear on what your purpose or your goal is. That is that's a great moment.
That's a skills transfer thing, right? Or is that? Or is
Yes, and
that?
in discovering, it's discovering what they call themselves or what they did
Right.
to
Right.
get
Right. Right.
there.
Right. Yeah.
Not how you and I call it. I mean, we can call them
What?
kids
Yeah.
that had a lot of money that could switch degrees. I couldn't. That's why I majored in poli sci, I guess. But anyway, but whatever we call them is irrelevant. It's what do they call themselves and what drives them. And when you have that understood, man, you get to be the hero for them because you hire them.
Because you know them better than most other. Yeah, it's
Right.
interesting. So you might not have a list of target companies, and you might not have a clearly defined target job title in a way. And it's almost like there's not even there may be some common skills, macro commonalities, but it's the micro commonalities that are not skill specific that are really significant. Like for example, some time ago, you might have heard of a company called Bridgewater.
Mm-hmm.
They're a big fund management company, one of the largest, and their founder and CEO Ray Dalio had a very specific way of um, recruiting people that had particular potential, but hadn't necessarily like we think you're going to do it, but you haven't done it yet, kind of
Right.
thing. And I was brought in to try to ideate ways that we could identify people with that potential using keyword analysis. And it's one of the things that led to my revelation around using cloud analysis. It's sort of built into that. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get at is it was nearly impossible to find any kind of common event. Some people were gold medalists. Some people were um, scholars or had won, huge merit scholarships. Some people were just went to the right school and worked their, behinds off. But there were all these different reasons why some people enlisted in the military and had a military trajectory that was far more accelerated than expected. So it's not how they started. It's basically what we were looking for was the speed of the trajectory. So if you went to college and went from 0 year to graduation year and you just followed along taking all the courses and you graduated and you're magna cum laude, yay for you, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the one that finished it in 3 years and won a merit scholarship.
Right.
And then got selected for Young Entrepreneur of the Year, stuff like that. It's just like this, and you can't really search for that in keywords, but you
No,
can search
because I
in,
think for me, when I hear you share that, Shally, I think there's a question behind that. Is why did you have to finish it in 3 years rather than 5, or why did it take me 5 years and my roommate 7 to get our degrees that were standard 4 years?
yeah, that's the question.
What was going on? But if you don't stop and ask that, then I would miss it too.
Right.
But I what it wasn't just that we found those keywords for the intellectual property IP attorney. It was that it really became an aha as we interviewed them and asked the questions.
Yep.
Well, why didn't you get your
What
CS
was the
degree?
transition?
Why did you leave your CS degree and go get law license? And that was the interesting thing. That's where we said, oh, there's this curiosity gene, if you will, that they just, and you could see in the questions, they were asking almost more questions during our interviews than we were of them, in that sense. They were just naturally curious. And that's something you can't train people on. That there's not a course. Well, maybe if you're a lawyer, maybe asking questions and crossing
investigative techniques and so on. But I think I know what you're saying. So it's the same with this concept that Ray Dalio wanted us to identify, which is, why did you want to win a gold medal? Of all the things that you wanted to do, you were pursuing a degree, you were working a job, and so why did you choose that? And how did you stay the course despite injuries and despite, why did you join the military and then proceed to like break all the rules and become an officer in record time? Why did you decide to go to this school when you were like,
right?
And that source is I don't want to say intangible, because it is. We did figure out patterns of ways to identify it and used it and implemented it, but it taught me a lot about words that are hidden in plain sight.
Yeah.
For example, one of the patterns that I recognized was that people used different tenses for the same word in their description. For example, engineered, engineering, engineers. Manager, managed, managing. So it's not just manager, it's manager, managed, managing.
Yeah.
If they have all three of those, then it's an indicator that's kind of like a trajectory.
Right.
It's just one silly example. There's others, and you can combine those.
Right.
Like
It also indicates what drives them.
Exactly. Right.
Too.
Exactly.
So why did you get your degree in 3 years? Well, because my father passed away, and I was going to have enough to do a luxurious 4-year. Got it. Okay. Well, I'm not saying that's what we started. You started.
But
but you understand that there was a driving need that they were willing to do it. And man, if you can unlock that in anybody, what the drive is, and make that their need that they will adopt for themselves, get out of their way. I mean, you can't teach them that enough. It's almost like what you're talking about is a version of Moneyball.
Yeah, it was really like that. It was patterns that were there, but nobody was seeing them because the obvious patterns were too obscuring.
Right.
The obvious patterns were like, the typical search that you do, years of experience, pedigree of company, type of school, type of degree, all these searches, these are macro commonalities. It's the little micro ones that were not very obvious. And that's exactly what Moneyball is. It's identifying those tiny little, the kid had a bum leg, therefore he developed a way better pitching arm than all the other kids, and that was his advantage. So he became, the this like ace pitcher that learned how to pitch to everybody based on their batting style. So they adapted to their batting style. Like, how do you figure that out? Well, I figured that out because they had a bum knee.
Right.
And it's like, oh, okay, so this guy's going to be the next world-class pitcher because they had a bum knee. Well, not everybody with a bum knee is going to become a world-class pitcher, right? So the
No,
Moneyball equation is definitely the right
yeah,
direction.
when you find that, we're seeing this a little bit right now with I say playing around in loose term with AI, with these
Okay, yeah,
large data
experimenting.
sets and
Yep.
models. And I'll have some people say, well, I just want it to do this. I'm like, well, you got to get curious and break it down into good script writing. Usually the smaller script, you put those together, then you get something really interesting for a first draft or a yield of what you're looking for. And that's forcing people to think, okay, well, I need to think about my audience. I need to think about the format. I need to think about my style. I need to think about, I need to have AI ask me questions so that
Yeah,
they
right.
can be better informed
So
on what
you
I
can
might
learn
be
from
thinking
them
about.
asking the questions.
Right. So there's all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff that we're almost back at this again in using AI and what it can do. I mean, yes, I know it can find a better job description. So that's interesting,
Right.
but that's the low hanging stuff. If we're going to get some of the complicated stuff, let alone what it can do for pipelining and discovering, trends and other analytics, we got to get really good at making these observations of, like you said, these keywords and note these patterns. They can have a bigger yield, and that's what it'll take. It'll take that small pattern, find a bigger yield for us, and then you look like the smartest person in the room for having done it. But you start out small.
Interesting. That's something that computers, machines are particularly good at. I'm really fond of an explanation that a friend and colleague gave me when I was exploring different solutions for AI, and I wanted to understand why everybody kept calling it AI when it really isn't. And I have since stopped arguing
Yeah.
and stopped saying it's not AI because there's no point in that. It is an AI, but there's just no point in me saying that because it's just become like it's trying to tell somebody it's not a Kleenex, it's a paper tissue, or it's not a Xerox, it's a photocopy. Like,
Right.
at some point you just give up. It is an AI, but I wanted to understand why we kept calling it that. And the explanation that he gave me was really, it was one of the most succinct explanations, just stuck with me. He said, look, if you make a nail hammering robot, that robot is going to hammer nails faster and better than any human ever could. But don't ask it to serve you tea. So machines are really good at some things, and this is one of them. Identifying unexplained or unknown or hitherto unseen patterns in massive amounts of data. So that's truly so. In other words, the end of the anecdote is it's not AI. It's just that the machines are able to analyze so much data, the vastness of the amount of data that it looks like AI
Right.
because they're making these inferences that humans could make that it would take a lot longer for humans to make. It would take years or decades or hundreds of years. So these AIs, quote unquote, are just analysis that are discovering new vaccines or new diseases or new cures for diseases because it was always there. We just never had enough data to look through.
Right. So now we have, hopefully this will get applied to, pipelining. I know it is in some senses, coming up with rules and key steps, but what it will do for us is it'll allow us to move away from the more manual stuff of finding connections and data points, and it'll allow us to think about the next level up of what does that mean
What
and
do we
how
do
we
with that? What
apply
is the
it.
point? Right.
But to do that, we almost have to get in again and relearn the art of asking some of those
Yeah.
obvious
Yeah.
questions and the whys to find other drivers so that we can make that next level better. So they'll continue. I mean, it's like the buggy whip industry. Eventually, it went bye bye,
Right.
and nobody rides horses around except for fun, I guess, unless you're at the racetrack. But this similar thing will happen with recruiting, and it'll be fine as long as we continue to have that curiosity about how can we work on higher valued work. If it's just about finding two resumes for customer care, shoot, that's the things that we can let our partners, our agencies do, and they'll do that great for a lower price point. But our
Mm-hmm.
value, and where we keep making a big difference in our organizations for our executives and our hiring managers, our clients, is taking care of presenting those great options to find great talent and do so in a timely, cost effective, and at scale manner. So as long as we keep focusing on that, things will continue to change, but we'll just roll right with it. We'll figure it out. It's part of our kind of our determinative spirit of things.
Yeah, yeah, that's the curiosity component, I think, which
Yeah.
is absolutely critical. So it's a kind of competitive intelligence.
Yeah.
Last or second to last question that I wanted to, almost last question I want to ask you is about Scrum. You mentioned something about adopting recruiting about your team, your process adopting or absorbing or learning
Mhm.
from the Scrum that developers do. What my understanding of it is, Scrum is essentially kind of like, it's similar to in business school, just in time, or um, inventory control and manufacturing, things like that. So, but what are you doing? How is recruiting learning from Scrum?
What are we adopting, and how are we adopting that? So
Yeah, whatever you can share that's not
sure. So
proprietary.
this started back in when we met at TiVo. I I wanted to. I had too many hiring managers saying, I don't bring up HR lingo. They didn't
Mm,
like it. They didn't
right.
want to hear it. They
Okay.
cringed. They didn't bother to learn it or appreciate it. And I could have gathered up my marbles and gone home and sucked on my thumb or something, I suppose. But I decided, saying, well, what are they doing that's so great that they don't want to learn any of the HR or recruiting lingo? And I just, that kind of opened up this whole world to Scrum methodology and agile thinking. And I thought, well, gosh. And then the other thing is, I took a course in project management, which I was around technical project managers from Space System L'Oreal, and I mean,
Mhm.
smart people, and heard how they were applying project management with that. That sounds a lot like
There's a
recruiting, just
lot of
using
project
different
management in
terminology.
recruiting. Yeah.
And so I just made a personal, you know, intention that slowly but surely, as much as my team could change with me, we were going to start changing how we looked and referred to things so that it was more natural for our engineering hiring managers and the other business people too. And we just did that. We explained, that this kickoff meeting is like our sprint planning, so we started to use those sort of analogies, and then we realized, man, there's a lot of wasted effort and cycle in recruiting. So we started to do stand-up meetings. We
Okay, I've
started
heard that. Yep.
to we started to award points to our hiring projects as far as difficulty and stuff like that. And we started to talk about how, from a Scrum team, the interview team really is like a Scrum team, and why, and so forth. So
Hmm.
I adopted that pretty quickly, and then I realized, oh, if I'm going to be a Scrum master, I need to also think about how do I start removing the blockers and the difficulties for my fellow staff, which you would assume would be the case of any people leader for their team. I just hadn't thought about it in engineering terminology. So we started to started to take on those sort of elements as well. So now we're here at present day Spokeo. We're starting to run our recruiting projects. We haven't gotten to the actual hiring projects itself, but the recruiting related projects that are not offer related, we'll say, whether it's recruitment marketing or pipelining, we're starting to run those in 2 week sprints. We scope them out. We have discussions about the difficulty value. We have a rubric using the Fibonacci code for that. And it's been great to know and compare notes with other project managers and other engineers saying, oh, well, here's how we do that. And there's lots of documentation out there on how the engineering do it and how they're trying to improve their velocity of completion and everything else. It's what I mean. That's exactly what recruiters want too. They want to be able to complete. They want to increase their mastery of certain skills. How can William help them realize that as well? So that's been something that's been part and parcel to how I've looked at it. And admittedly, it is biased towards software engineering. And I
Okay.
know there's other companies that do waterfall and stuff like that, or Kanban, and those all have good benefits too. But this is something that I've done with my teams, and it's been once they understand it, really really embraced and start they start talking that way. And it's the greatest thing when you start having both candidates and hiring managers start wondering, who's the real hiring manager, and when they think your recruiter is actually the possible hiring manager, particularly if you're a candidate. That to me is kind of such a huge accomplishment and the biggest compliment that they understand the business, they understand the tech stack, they understand the history, the culture, and they are so well representing your client, the hiring manager of the company, that hey, they get all the credit. It makes for a great candidate experience, and the bond between the hiring manager and the recruiter can't get much stronger than that.
When you said the Fibonacci sequence, that's that sort of like it's like a like that, or like the previous two numbers added up lead to the third one. So it's kind of like
Yes.
a so in that analysis, you're saying that the point system was following that. So the further they were out from the center,
Right. So let me back up a half step. I realized I could have rushed that a little bit.
that was just it was just me.
What,
I felt like I was a
so
half step behind.
we're looking. We assume that right now our hiring searches take up a certain percentage of our time
Right.
over a week. The other portion, we try to figure out how many points can we fit into that in a given 2 week sprint and
Okay.
complete things. And we have a rubric that we stole from one of our engineering scrum teams. And it goes from one, hey, really easy, there's no QA, just get it done one day type of thing, all the way down to, I think the max we've gone is 13, where you got to have executive approval, QA sign off. It would be probably
Super
akin to
complex.
redesigning our core website. It is, and that probably even includes multiple sprints. It
Got
probably
it.
will have to be breakdown. 13 may even be, when you get that large number, you probably have to start thinking about how do I break it into smaller chunks from
That
there.
makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay. Yeah. Because of the complexity or the time involved or the yeah.
And the
All right.
number of
Now I
parties
got it.
that have to be involved in approving that.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, some of our Scrum teams do not have design at all because it's all back end related. Cool. Okay. Well, that simplifies a lot, saves resources. And that's why design is more of a shared resource versus having to be on each and every team, as opposed to, at least on the software sense, you want QA on every team, you want DevOps in every team. Those are required, stakeholders or participants for
Although it seems like
software
you're
products.
complicating it, you're actually simplifying it because
Right.
you're reducing all alternative steps that would have caused delays and have shipping something off and then having it shipped back versus just
Correct.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So last question, and I know we're pretty close on time here, but I did want to ask you this. You were talking about this is part of me just kind of um, being evil to a certain degree because I feel the pain and I want other people to see to see someone else feeling the pain. You just got into recording content for training your team, and you're delivering the content asynchronously. So in other words, you're recording video content to be played back. And I hear a lot from clients. They go, "Oh, we have our own internal training. We're going to do our own internal training." Everybody thinks that they can do their own asynchronous video training until what happened with you happens to them. So can
Mhm.
you share with us exactly how painful it is to actually really do asynchronous training? It's not a matter of I'm just going to get in front of the camera and record some, videos. Yay.
Well, there's a couple lines of thought. One, the people that get up and present the news or something like that regularly, they make it look easy, and I guess that's why you got professionals, and they have an earning capacity that is in the stratosphere. Good for them. Um,
Right.
you can tell I'm certainly
Getting
not
in
one
front
of
of a
them.
camera for them is like you and
No,
I writing an email
no,
or,
I can
you know,
barely do a stick figure, Shally. So,
yeah,
but draw a stick figure. The other one is there's also doing something well enough so that it is useful and
hmm,
absorbed or adopted
yep,
as one know. So those are the two tensions. Otherwise, the worse you want it, the worse you get it. I guess is the other thing.
right.
So not realizing I can't attain the former, but having no
Right,
desire to go
you're
to
not
the
a highly
latter.
trained professional actor, and you're not a highly trained professional educator, so getting in front of the camera is difficult, and
Right.
putting together material in a succinct enough manner that's
Can
edited
I can
enough
I
that
can I baffle? No, I can't
yeah,
baffle.
that retains their
So
interest, that keeps it. It's really hard to do content that sticks. It's really hard for learning
right.
asynchronously. It's just
So what I had to do, what I was doing is I was delivering it live, and that was had its own problems. I had it well,
right.
but it was solved because I had at one point a bigger team. Somebody could run the scheduling, somebody could herd cats and get everybody in the room. And but now that everybody in this day and age from productivity is being asked to do more with in some cases less. I figured this is one of the things that I need to pay the piper now, pay the pound of flesh or the pain now, but that the idea is it should last me for the next 2 or 3 years because I'll be able to automate it to a certain extent. And so I'm taking what we referred to as our 100 series for interview training workshop, about 4 different modules. And rather than present it in an hour and a half or 2 hours, I'm breaking it into like 15-minute chunks and am going to be recording it on a video platform, specific video platform that can track who watches it,
Who watches it,
can
right?
also deliver a quiz for retention and
Yeah,
for
what's called
veracity of having attended it. Yeah,
learning activities. Yeah,
right. And so doing that, it's interesting because I'm kind of a little bit of it back in school again in the sense of, it's one thing for me to deliver it, but it's another thing to actually script what I'm going to say and
that's
you
hard to
you think
do.
about your words a little bit differently when you do that. I mean, this is going to live on for a little bit, and I need to have the content reviewed and approved. So there's some steps doing that. But the wonderful thing, and this kind of brings it back to AI, or sorry, machine learning, is there's a whole bunch of when I'm stuck for an alternative way of presenting something or wording something, chat, Claude, whatever you're using is wonderful to get you through that over that hump of different ways to present. Or I want this style to be replicated throughout the whole module, and it'll go through and find out quickly, as opposed to having to painfully do that yourself or take up your marketing person's time doing it. It's amazing what you can get done. So I have by the end of this year, all 4 modules, in addition to recruiting, in addition to leading a team and other, deliverables, to have those 4 modules done for that. But I think it'll be fun. We're going to probably put everybody back through it, even if they completed it a year or two ago, because I don't know why. I mean, they do it for harassment training and other critical things. Why not do it for interviewing and hiring? People should have refresher courses, even if they're been doing it for 20 years, like some of us.
Yeah, it's always good. It's like I like to say it's kind of like pick whatever your favorite athlete is, Federer, the tennis player, right? He still has coaches. Well, not anymore because he's retired. But he, even at the top of this game, he had a swing coach, he had a fitness coach, he still had coaches because you need to constantly revisit the fundamentals. Even like putting one step forward in front of the other, because if you forget that or you do that wrong, it leads to all kinds of other things. getting mixed up or not working well later on, and we just sort of take it for granted. So it's a really good idea to refresh those every once in a while. Just take a course on how to
Yeah.
step. You might
No,
you might think you don't need it, but
you're so true, Shally. When you say that, I think one, if you always think that if you wake up every morning and say, one, not only am I grateful that I have another day, but there's something out there for me to learn.
right,
That feeding that
that's a
curiosity,
good day.
life will never get boring for you.
Right.
Two, it keeps me realizing grounded that I don't know everything, and I know that, but it's great to have that remind. And then three, it's good to get outside your own head. And like you mentioned with the coaches, they can spot stuff that I'm way just too close to see. And that's something that other tools and other
Yeah,
people
because you're right
do.
in front
That's
of
the
them.
benefit of having a scrum team, if you will, or coaches to point that out. So yeah,
Yeah.
great points.
Well, man, it's been a pleasure as usual to chat with you. I'd love to have you back on the show. Before I let you go, though, I do have to ask you the same two questions I ask all my guests.
Oh,
The
okay.
first one of those is, who should be our next guest?
Oh my goodness.
And it's okay if it's someone we already invited. Just
Well,
who do
so
you think we should interview next? They
yeah.
may not even accept the invite, but I'll try.
Well, I think this guy's a real um, kind of a pillar in the recruiting community. I'd be surprised um, if not. And I'd have to say John Vasilika.
Oh,
If
good
you
one. Yeah.
if you haven't,
From
he's
Seattle.
always thinking of something new or something that he's heard, and he's noodling on it. And I
That's a
love
good
doing
one.
that, whether he's doing it on LinkedIn or actually teaching a workshop or presenting somewhere. Yeah, that'd be a
Done
quick
and
thing.
done. I'm going to invite him. See if he takes the bait. And then the last question is for people that watch this as a replay, which is a majority of folks because they can't be online at 1 in the afternoon on a Friday. Um, Leave them with something that you think that they should think about. So not words of wisdom, but a question that drives wisdom in themselves. Like what do you want them to mull over, chew on, think about after they watch this?
Uh, Also a good question. So I would. This is going to sound really meta, but I do mean it for as intended, particularly for the recruiting and sourcing and HR community. What's your purpose? Why
Reflection.
why why are you doing what you're doing right now? Not just that somebody gave you the job or you live in hot Atlanta or in my case here, the Phoenix Valley where it's drier. Why are you doing what you're doing? I think your perspective on that shows up in how you do what you do. And I think that's worth examining. I think everybody's life is worth has a great value, that we're all here for a purpose. But if you the individual aren't dialed into what that is, um, I think you're missing out on some of the fun in understanding that.
Deep. All right. I like it. Great way to close.
Yeah,
Man, thanks a lot for being on the show, everybody. Skip next week or watch the replay if you want. The week after that, we have ABQ, Amy Beth Quinn, coming on board to meet with us.
another
Until
good name.
then,
Yeah,
yeah, another good one. I've got some doozies in here. I'm starting to catch the big whales.
there you go.
Until then, please be kind to yourselves and take care.